Alright guys, so today I'm talking another morning. Got a little head start on you guys before I turn the camera on. Started painting the block. So this color is called, get the can here in a second, I think it's called AMC Blue Metallic. It's pretty cool. It actually lays out really nice, and the metallic flake in it's actually pretty heavy. I didn't expect it to be like that. It almost reminds me of like the Chrysler or the Dodge Challenger blue, but a little bit more green. You probably can't pick that up on camera. Anyway, all I did was I just went through with some brake clean, paint thinner, acetone, whatever you have. Cleaned up the exterior of the block, sort of covered up the head gasket surface with some towels and just laid some stuff on top so that we don't get any paint on there, because I kind of need that. Threw an old timing cover on and just sort of painting up the front of the block, sort of going in half sections basically. I already have the new timing cover. I'll actually go grab it here in a second and show you guys. This one I had done by a buddy of mine, dude named Omar, twin built, and I put this in this location. I drilled it and I brought the fitting to him and I had him weld it. I never checked to see that when I put a fitting on there, or even if I could put a fitting on there, if it would clear the harmonic balancer. So it was never going to work anyway, so that was fun. So this timing cover could be used on anything now, but it needs to have a -10 cap on it, and I don't think any of the shorter balancers, I use truck balancers for everything because they're cheap, and most of the time I get them for free. Yeah, I don't think a truck balancer, anything other than a truck balancer, will work with that position of that fitting. I'll grab the other one for comparison here in a second. I already painted it. So I'll set you guys up and I'll start painting some more. Alright, this is the new timing cover I was talking about. I effectively have an eBay knockoff of the ICT billet timing cover. I got this for a pretty good deal, but you get what you pay for. And with this one, everything looks exactly the same pretty much. The welding is not perfect, obviously, but it'll seal. I don't see any visible gaps, and I don't see why it would leak at this point. But when they installed these fittings, what they did was they welded them, and then it looks like they cleaned up the inside of the fitting from like extra bits of material, or they never finished the fittings themselves, I'm not sure. But when I looked down in, there were bits of like aluminum down these holes that were just there from like leftover swarth from machining. So I just had to go through and clean that up. I just used like a screwdriver and broke off all the extra bits and sprayed it out with brake clean. And other than that, this is the right bolt pattern and all the dimensions seem correct. I compared this to the one on the Maverick. That's the ICT billet one, and it's the exact same thing. The placement is all the same. None of the bolts are blocked by the fitting. It looks like it's really close, but it actually does clear the bolt. Getting an extension might be a pain in the neck or a socket on there, but I'm gonna build this thing on a stand, so I got all room I need for the time being. The timing seal that comes in these is like a cheap Chinese, like, this thing is rigid. Like, if you ever get like a fresh Velcro or National seal, they're a lot more flexible. They have a lot more give to them. This thing just feels like vinyl or like PCV or something that they just molded. It probably would seal for a while, but I'm gonna knock it out since I have legit gaskets from Holley anyway, and just throw a fresh one in there. I got a little bit of overspray on the bottom rail here, but that's nothing a little bit of acetone or brake clean can't clean up. This would have been better, but I had a mishap when I tried clear coating it to make it really shiny, and the old clear coat nozzle decided to drip on me, so it's real inconsistent across here. It looks real bad. I mean, I'm not the best painter to begin with, but that didn't help. So all I'm doing to the block, I'm not even gonna try and clear it this time. I'm just gonna paint the block, maybe go over it with like a blow with the propane or butane torch a little bit, just to kind of cure it faster. Seems to work really well when I do that to stuff, at least with engine paint. I don't know if it's because it's ceramic or if it's like the enamel just prefers the heat, but when I go over it, it seems to like even out the paint and make it a little more glossy. So we'll try that trick on a few spots, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll just repaint it and call it a day. Once this thing's in the car, you won't be able to see about 80% of the block anyway, so I'm not too worried about it, but aesthetically for me, I would like to have it nicely painted, at least on the spots where I want to paint it. Where the bell housing is, I'm just going to completely ignore, just because it's going to be covered by a transmission, and the transmission is black. It's a Hughes Performance one. And the top of the block I'll probably leave bare as well, because I know that eventually when I'm installing everything or when I'm cleaning it, I'm going to use brake cleaner and I'm going to wipe off the paint anyway, so I'll leave that bare just so it doesn't look like garbage when I go to clean it later again anyway. And I know what you're thinking. Not all the block is sealed. I know. For as many times I'm gonna go through this thing with brake clean, all that stuff's coming out anyway. So don't worry about that. I've done that with the other motor and it seems to work just fine. So I'll change the angle and I'll cut back to me painting this. 1 second. To explain this, you saw me going over it with a torch. I do that mainly to try and get most of the moisture out of the block if there was any left, and then also when you wipe stuff down with acetone, it sort of dries out a little bit slower, that I found. So I just kind of burn it out real quick, and it doesn't really leave any soot because it burns pretty clean. It also gets the block kind of warm and ready for the paint. That's why you saw me move all this stuff back, so that, I don't start a fire right here. Probably could just move that completely off the block along with this other flammable stuff, but that's neither here nor there. Nothing caught on fire, we're good. So all I'm gonna do now is go over this and just start painting it while the block is still relatively warm. And then I'll, put you guys back on the time lapse, because watching paint dry is kind of boring when you do it in real time. So we'll keep it moving. Camera turned off a little bit earlier, but I moved on to running thread chaser through all the head bolt holes, and it was going really well. So plan A with this was to buy this thread chaser. That this is the only other company I found that makes this is called a company called Gator Fasteners that makes the right thread of this thread chaser. If you're wondering, LS head bolts are M11 by 2.0, which is an oddball thread to begin with. And then the only company that makes a thread chaser specifically for the LS is ARP, which is about a $60 or $70, maybe $80 tool. That's the right length for all the head bolts, no matter what block you have. Because on some of these head bolts, they're like 5 or 6 inches long, and the threads are about 3 inches recessed into the block. I'll actually show you right now what happened. Anyway, I was thread chasing, and I took this tap, welded it to this extension, and I was like, sweet, I just made myself the correct size with a 1/4 inch drive 3/8 or 1/4 inch drive square on the end for a ratchet for less than, I think it was like 25 bucks shipped for this thread chaser. Welded it. Welding seals are not the greatest. I got to kind of a spot where there's a little bit of grit in the thread, and lo and behold, the old weld didn't hold up as well as I thought it would. I thought I had it pretty good. I cleaned up the weld and everything, and you know, it broke off. Luckily, this tap is just long enough to stick out of one of these holes, and it wouldn't be the first time I broke a fastener in one of these, and the first time I wasn't able to actually remove the fastener, so I had to basically either run the block with one less head bolt or just give up on the block, because it was going to be way too expensive to get that block to be able to be usable after all the machine shop work and fees. So that one stopped my heart for a second. Let me grab plan B, which is what I'm using right now. I already got this side of the head done as far as thread chasing. So if you don't know, on some of these LS blocks, in this one in particular, because it's the older style, there's 3 different head fastener sizes. You get your small one up here. That one's kind of obvious where all the intake side bolts go. Then on the end, either side of the cylinder head, on this hole and this hole over here, they get a shorter fastener, and then basically every other hole in the block gets a longer fastener. So let me grab the longest one and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Finish chasing this hole, already in there. So this was plan B right here. Just one of the extra long head bolts with, let me actually clean this up real quick. So one of the extra long head bolts with some slots cut into it, you can kind of see there. Not sure how well the camera's picking that up, but Robbie actually told me about this. And this is basically making like your own redneck, you know, thread chaser without having to buy the ARP one. Which, considering that I already experimented and failed, I didn't want to throw any more money into this portion of this than I needed to. And this seems to be working just fine. Once you cut the flutes into it, the bolt, just run it in, run it out. I do it once or twice just to make sure the thread feels smooth on the way in, and then I finish up. At the end of all this, I'm just gonna throw a little bit of brake cleaner in all the holes and flip the motor upside down and let it all kind of drain out. I don't really have shop air here, otherwise I would just spray it with air and get anything out of there. I will do it with the brake clean and a little nozzle and go over through each one, and then I'll flip it upside down just to make sure any liquid drains right out of it I don't want any water sitting in it because then I just have rust again back in the hole. So for the time being, I'll probably just flip this around, throw you guys on a time lapse so you can watch me finish up the other side. 1 second. So notice me choking up on the wrench, pretty much grabbing it by the actual wrench head itself. And that's just because I don't have a 1/4 inch ratchet that fits this socket. So all I'm doing is basically just choking up on it so I have less leverage on it, less chance of breaking anything. Also, if there's any liquid left at the bottom of the thread and you keep trying to force it, you can actually cause it to compress liquid, which it can't, and it'll either hopefully shoot through the threads or it'll crack the block. So tread lightly. That's why you see me using a ratchet, not an impact. I'll probably go through each hole quickly with my impact on like the lowest setting just to see if there's any that are extra tight, and then I'll just spray them out with a little bit of brake clean, flip it over, and call it a day, because this is probably good enough for what I'm doing. And being that I'm using a little bit of brake clean, it's actually drying out the thread, so it's actually causing a little more drag because it's just dry metal on dry metal. When I go to put the actual fasteners in, they're going to have ARP lubricant, which should make this easier, per se. So I just kind of tighten it down until I get to like a spot that it seems like it wants to stop. Then I'll go a few more threads just to see. And if it gets easier, then hey, I know it's got more. If it stays pretty tight, I'm not going to press my luck, you know what I'm saying? So it works pretty good. It's just picking up all the rust and dirt, anything that's collected in there since whenever it was disassembled. And all I'm doing is taking the brass brush, cleaning off the tool itself, and then spraying it out with a little bit of, I had brake cleaner, went through 2 half cans of that, and now I'm on to my gum out. The stuff I didn't want to use because it's a little more expensive. But you know, I also don't want to stop in the middle of doing this, so there's that. So yeah, that one threads in real easy. Goes pretty much, I'd say 90% of the way in because I've already chased it. Goes down to a stop. Set this thing to tighten. Give it a couple of turns. 1, 2, maybe 3. 3 feels way too tight, so back it off. Since I've already gone through it once, it's pretty easy now, but it's still definitely picking up mud and rust. So brush off my tool. Spray it out. And repeat. So, finished up chasing everything, went around, blew everything out with a little bit of brake clean, flipped it over, dumped all the brake clean out. Camera kept dying, unfortunately, while I was doing all this. Basically went around, wiped off some of the overspray that was on where the water pump mounts and possibly where the timing cover is. Cleaned up all that stuff, came up to the oil pan rail, wiped off some of the paint from there, pulled all the little bits of paper that I put into all the holes to make sure paint didn't get into the bottom end too much. I just went through everything, cleaned it up with a little bit of paint thinner, acetone again, and then I went through and hit it all with some fogging oil. I actually, one second. I know this isn't technically what this is for, but if it's for long storage and fighting corrosion and fighting winter and all that stuff, this is probably just what I need anyway. So I'm just spraying this all over the block. It seems to stick really well. Like, it's a very tacky oil, so it's kind of good for this. And I'm just spraying it all over just to make sure that none of the lifter bores get rusty, or make sure that none of these main cap areas where the bearing sits gets rusty on me, because then that's just a pain in the neck if I have to clean it again. So now we're up to the point where I'm gonna start probably assembling this here soon. I have the crank, I have the rods, I have the pistons. I'll probably have another video of me actually hanging the pistons on the rods. And I did end up being able to get some flat tops. There's some Silverlight flat tops that you'll see in the next video of me putting stuff together. So for now, I'll cut this one off and see you on the next one.